Hi everyone, I'm Renata Jansen. I sculpt polymer clay figures, one of a kind usually. I'm going to tell you all about my story of how I became a polymer clay artist. I didn't start out thinking I was going to be a polymer clay artist. When I finished school, I loved art first of all. At school, that was the only thing I was good at really, was art. And I knew I was going to do something with art. I wanted to be a graphic designer and I did all the drawings. You had to have a whole portfolio to apply and I didn't get in. Second choice was textile design, so I got into that. So I studied textile design for 3 years, and by the first year I realised that actually if I had done graphic design I probably would have ended up in textile design because it was better for me. It definitely was more up my street really. Did a lot of drawing of flowers, a lot of design obviously. I really enjoyed that. I really loved college. I hated school but I loved college. That was just, every day was doing what I loved doing. Every lesson was something art, obviously. It was, we even did some life drawing, which was great. But I never really thought about doing anything else. My mum always wanted me to do fine art, but I thought, no, I don't want to do fine art because there's no real end to that. I just wanted to get into a job and have, in those days it was a long time ago. It was, you did a job and you got your salary, and that sounded like a really good idea for me. I wanted to get into that. And I worked really hard at college. On a Friday afternoon, everyone would have a half day. There was me going to go and work in a company that I really wanted to get into. And I did get into that company and everything was going really well. And then I moved to England. I was in South Africa at the time. And then I moved to England when I was about 24. I applied for a job and I got a job. I didn't believe that I could come to England and get a job. And I got a job in a really great textile design company. It was fantastic. For the first few years, I worked as an employed designer in the company. It was lovely. We all worked, we had our desks all together, we used to chat in the day and obviously do our work. It was the best job. Then I got pregnant and I had my daughter and I worked freelance, which was also great. I used to work at night. It was fantastic when you have a baby. You can just work when you need to. It was really great. And I worked like that for many, many years. All in all, I worked 12 years as a textile designer. And then in about 2003, 2004, work just dried up. There were no patterns and things became quite plain, and a lot of things were computer generated designs, which they call CAD. But when I started many years ago, CAD was only very, very small. We messed around a bit with computers, but we didn't learn to design on a CAD or on a computer. And so for me it would have meant re-studying. So what I wanted to do instead of that is try and find something else. By then I thought maybe I'll go into painting, maybe painting on canvas. I tried that for a year. Those days the computer was not what it is now. So I went to the library, I got books out, I taught myself. It was great actually. Just learning about light and colour mixing and how to do the underneath sort of rough sketch in paint and then adding the colour on top. I really loved all that. Then my daughter, it was in year 3 or 4 of primary school, she heard about the tsunami in 2004 and she really wanted to do something to help. She wanted to sell friendship bracelets that we'd made. And she went round and she sold those friendship bracelets in school and she did really well with it. So we got really into it. And then I thought, let's do some that have faces on them. I looked into how to make polymer clay faces. At first I just did it myself, but then I thought, let's look into how to sculpt a face. And then I discovered fairies that were sculpted in polymer clay and looked like real people. And they were amazing. And I didn't know how people could even possibly do that. And so I started to look really into it and followed forums. There were forums at the time. There wasn't so much YouTube. Got really into reading up how to bake the clay, what tools to use. And for a long time, before I actually started sculpting myself, I was sort of virtual sculpting in my head, just reading other people sort of talking about it, asking questions. So by the time I actually got my first bunch of clay, it was for my birthday. I didn't know if I could do it, but I really, really wanted to try. And that's where I started. I'd sort of already worked out or learned how to do it from other people. So starting with a ball of clay and then sort of working the face out of this ball of clay. And that's really where I started. And then it's really just gone on from then. I was a bit obsessed from that moment onwards. When I started sculpting, I actually found that it was much easier. It sort of flowed more than painting ever had. I'd never sculpted before in my life. I think everyone's different, and just for me, that just felt so much more natural. I kind of just stayed with it then. I really just put painting aside. I had some success with painting. I did a painting based on football. It was a theme, and I entered a few competitions, and one of them was a themed football, and my painting got in and was exhibited in a gallery in Manchester, which was really great. But when I started sculpting, I just really felt like it was so natural compared to painting. Painting felt like it sort of was pushing through kind of a maze almost, where sculpture just flowed. It just felt really, really natural to me. So I just carried on. I liked the community. I found a bunch of people who were just really nice, and I felt like I'd found my place, really. And so I just carried on. I wanted to make it into a career, something that I could earn money from, and then I could do it every day. And that seemed like a really great idea. So in the beginning, my sculptures were very, well, obviously, you know, in the beginning you're still learning, you don't know enough about anatomy, you're doing your best, and so they weren't fantastic, but they were a start, and I was proud of them because I'd actually managed to do something in clay, which I didn't know whether I could or not until I tried. And so the first few I really sold for very small amounts, £25 I think the first one was. The reason as well was because I was listing wrong. I was listing only on English eBay, where you have to list through American eBay because you need to widen your range of customers. A lot of people who buy these sculptures are in America or somewhere else in the world, so you do need to be international. I did that for a while and realized that I was listing them wrong, continued. So after my first international sale, I then had to panic about how to post, because that's the next step. And it can be very scary in the beginning, especially when you don't know what you're doing, because there wasn't a lot of information. So in the beginning, I got a bit of advice on the internet, tried a few ways, had a few breakages, usually fingers, and luckily people were very understanding. I offered, obviously you always have to offer to have someone send them back and try and fix it for them, but I was really lucky. People were very understanding. They just glued the fingers back, so it's very, very lucky there. So eventually we all got lucky in the community because Anna Marie put out a tutorial on how to package figures in the best way possible. I still use that same technique, where she has a photographic tutorial. I'll see if I can find it and link it. And I also have a video tutorial based very much on her original packaging. So that was many years ago, and I still use it to this day because it never fails me. It is definitely the best way. After my first few international sales, I'd sort of got myself knowing what I was doing, and so I started to look into what kind of figures do I want to sculpt. I tried portraiture. I like portraiture. I don't think it's what I really want to do all the time though. I do love fantasy. I don't do as many portraits now. I do think it's actually really good to do portraiture though, because it makes you have to look at anatomy, especially obviously of the face, very carefully, because you've got a living, breathing example of what that is supposed to look like. Whereas if you just do things out of your imagination, maybe using a loose reference, there's too much. Well, I mean, it's good to do that. I do that all the time, but in the beginning, it's quite good for learning anatomy. So I did do that a bit. And I do enjoy portraiture, but I think I really enjoy doing my own work more. Once I started selling on eBay, got in the right place, knew how to list my auction properly, that's basically how I sold for many, many years. And the prices went up as people got to know me more, got to know my figures more. I wouldn't say that eBay is a great place now to sell. I wouldn't sell on eBay now myself. I rather sell privately. It's harder privately because eBay was good when you're somebody who doesn't really want to set a price on your work. eBay was really good for, you would start kind of at a reasonably low. You have to still have an amount that you are happy to part with your work for, but you can start at the lower end. And in the old days, eBay would bid it up and you would get a really, a decent price for what you had created. But these days it's not quite as easy to do that. I don't know if maybe the market is more saturated, there are not so many people on eBay maybe. It's just not as easy to do that. You don't get as many bids. So these days I sell most of my work on my website, and I do take the odd commission as well. I also sell some work through Dollary. Speaking of the Dollary, that's how I got the peak of my career, or the part that I feel most proud of, and that is the commission to do the Kings of Leon heads for their album walls. As I continued with my sculpture, I obviously wanted to bring painting back in, because I still do love painting. Even though I love sculpture most, I do love painting, and I love painting flowers. And so that's how we got onto the big flowery tattoos. And actually tattoos of any kind, I really love doing them, because you've sculpted something that's got a large area that you can then decorate. When I first started, no one wanted to share their work much, and I was the same. I was like scared really to share. What if I share my work and then someone does it better than me and I won't be able to do this anymore? But you realize over time that actually it's better to share. It's better to share everything you do. Every time you share, you're getting people interested in what you're doing. This book, Show Your Work, is quite good for actually giving you the confidence to show your work, and to actually give you the kick up the bum as well to actually show your work. Because my favourite thing is to just crawl in my little cave and do my thing and not get out there and be on social media and all that. Although once you're out there on social media, it's actually quite fun. But getting yourself there is really a hard push. If you're not out there, how's anyone going to know about you? And it's quite good to show your good and your bad, because it gives people confidence in themselves, help them. It feels really good to help other people. And also, it's good for other people to know that you don't always get it right, and that sometimes there are things that you do wrong, and then it's kind of entertaining to see how you fix it. As my journey continues of sculpture, I'm actually wanting to get larger and larger. There's many reasons for that, one of them being my eyes are not what they used to be. But actually, I really love getting bigger scale, because the eyes can be bigger, which means you can put more color, more detail in. Faces being bigger is just a nicer, larger scale to work on. So I'm sort of slowly, very slowly, because I think I say I'm going larger scale every year and sort of don't get there. That is the goal, slowly, to get to doing larger scale figures. It does mean that you probably need to make soft bodies or ball and joints or something like that, because the larger scale you go, the heavier the whole piece will get if you've got a solid clay. So at the moment, my solid clay figures are around 11 inches tall. I would say you can go up to 15 inches. I've also done some 12-inch child figures, which means they can be slightly bigger, because obviously children are shorter. So those were great. I really know that is where I want to go with it, because it's just so much fun to go larger. But I want to go even larger than that. So who knows what's going to come in the future. But that's the thing with something like this. When you're working for yourself and you're sort of progressing along, you never really get to a point where you do something and then you stay there. You're always moving forward, and there's always something more to do. So that's why doing something like this it never really gets old. You never get bored. So although it was never my intention to be a doll artist, I'm really glad that I stumbled upon it, and thank you to my daughter, who is the reason why I am a doll artist to this day. And I think I will never stop changing, moving forward, so who knows what's coming in the future. As well as my own journey, I'm really enjoying helping others with their journey. If you would really like to be a part of my studio, my virtual studio, you are welcome, very, very welcome to join me on Patreon. If I can help you, I will do my best to do so. If you would like to join my mailing list, you will get a free tutorial on how to sculpt a nose. And the noses were one of the hardest things for me in the beginning. I remember when I started, I sculpted one of my first face. It was probably about the 5th, 6th, 7th face. I sold the face, and I sold the figure, and my client at the time was very truthful, and I am very grateful for it, because he said to me that he liked it very much, but the nose was a bit big. And that made me really look at my nose and realize, yes, it was a bit big. So sometimes when people say things, it can kind of knock your confidence, but actually it's the best thing. Those are the treasures in life, when people say the truth, because it made me look at what I'd done, and it made me really get it right. And I realized I was just making noses way too big. So if you've got to the end of this long ramble about my career in doll making, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.